Okay, welcome everyone to this evening's presentation. We're celebrating or observing Asian Pacific American Heritage Month as well as Mental Health Awareness Month. We want to welcome our presenter, Melissa Molitor. And Melissa, I want you to introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here. Um, I am going to tell you a little bit about myself, but I would first like to invite all of you to introduce yourselves in the chat, if you will. And while I'm doing that, I'll share that, yes, my name is Melissa Raymond Molitor. I am a professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in the Art Therapy and Art Education departments. I'm the founder of Evanston ASPA Initiative and the Kitchen Table Stories Project, and I'm also the co-founder of Kids Create Change, which is a nonprofit organization here in Evanston. I've been an Evanston resident for over 10 years, and I have two sons who went through District 65 and are now attending ETHS. I am a registered art therapist and licensed clinical professional counselor, but would prefer to describe myself more as an artist educator, a student of equity and social justice, and a facilitator of community care and social change. All of this to say that this is not my story. Well, it's a little part of my story, but it's not all of it. Make sure that... So I'm sure that many of you have seen this image. It is of the iceberg that a lot of people use to explore identity. So we're looking at both visible and invisible aspects of identity. So here you can see the descriptors above the C line are the things that we can see that trigger our bias and assumptions based on our own experiences and knowledge. And then the descriptors below the C line are not as visible. They're often hidden. They're things that we wouldn't know about someone unless we had a conversation with them or developed a relationship with them. It's not until we are able to acknowledge, learn, and accept all aspects of one's identity that we are whole, that our stories are true. So I decided not to use the iceberg. Instead, I chose an image of Taal, which is a volcano that is found 31 miles south of Manila in the Philippines. The reason I chose this image is because I have a more personal connection to it. My mother is from the Philippines and lived much of her life in Manila. My stepmom, also from the Philippines, is going to be taking my eldest son to Manila with her later this summer. I feel like the volcano is a much more accurate metaphor for me and my identity. Here you can see above the sea line are aspects of my identity that are visible. And even though most of them are visible, some of them are still questionable. Not everyone sees me and thinks that I'm in my late 40s. Not everyone sees me and assumes I'm Asian American. Um, but most people can identify that I am able-bodied, I'm an English speaker, I'm a mother to mixed race children, and a partner in an interracial marriage. Those are sort of the outward facing things. And then in getting to know me, you'll find that there is a lot that one wouldn't know just by looking at me. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but if you dig a little bit deeper, I identify as Filipino, I identify as Indian. Um, I am a daughter of immigrants. I am an American citizen. I'm an artist. I'm addicted to word games. So lots of things you wouldn't know about me just looking at me. Moving forward, I want to establish that I don't consider myself an expert. My work is personal and draws from my own experiences and narrative. Also, I'll be using the term Asian American because of its widespread use and federal denomination, but I tend to use the acronym ASPA so that it's representative of Asian, South Asian, and Pacific Islander Americans. So I want to actually start off with a little activity, if you would indulge me. I'd like you to think about um, some of the common stereotypes or myths that you know of or that you've heard that is associated with Asian Americans, or ASPAs. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to use a Jamboard, and I don't know if you are all familiar with that, but it's a virtual whiteboard that everyone can add to. So it's a tool that we can use to brainstorm as a group in real time and see what it is that we're adding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it to the chat, the link to the chat, so that you can click on that. And when you click on that, this is what you'll see. And if you don't see that, then let me know. So once you're in the Jamboard, if you look to the left, you can see there's a little icon that has, it's like a little, it's a sticky note. If you hover over it, it says sticky note. And you can click on that and add your ideas to the Jamboard. So if someone would go ahead and try that out, then we can see what that's going to look like. Okay. So someone added good at math. I'm going to add the model minority. Anyone else have any? If the Jamboard's not working for you, you can also just yell it out or put it in the chat. So I have in the chat smart and hardworking. Mm-hmm. Can anyone else think of any other? Thank you, Jess. All Asians look the same. And in the chat, we also have COVID-19. Which is not spelled with a C, sorry. Anything else? And we have another one, Jocelyn said, likes to volunteer. Yes, often asked, where are you really from? Okay, thank you. I'm going to share a video with you now, and this will definitely spark some more thoughts and ideas about some common stereotypes and myths.
What kind of Asian are you? How do you say in your language? You speak really good English. When did you come to America? Where are you from? No, I mean, where are you really from? Can you teach me how to use chopsticks? You don't even have an accent. What's your real name? Are you Chinese? Are you Korean? Are you Japanese? Seriously, what the are you? You were born here? What language do you speak at home? Do you get good grades? Do you know Kung Fu? Do you know karate? Are there swords in your house? My friend is Chinese. Do you know him? Say my name in your language. What do you think about Jeremy Lin? How many car accidents have you been in? Can you tell the difference between other Asians? I've never heard of that country. What's MSG? Can you read this? Can you solve this? Can you do my math homework? Can you fix this? You're Korean? 안녕하세요. Come on, that was pretty good, huh? What are those Asians saying? What's a Filipino? Are you two related? I would never date an Asian. I only date Asians. I don't have a fetish. I totally have a fetish. Do you only date Asian girls? Do you only date white girls? Would you date a black girl? You would? How come you only hang out with Asians? How come you never hang out with Asians? Why don't you have any black friends? Why do you only have black friends? Are Filipinos Mexican? You're Chinese? I love sushi. Does it bother you when I call you a gook? Why can't I call you an Oriental? It's okay for me to call you a Chink because we're friends. Why are you being so sensitive? I'm not a racist. My girlfriend is Asian. I do a really good Chinese accent. You are such a typical Asian. You are so not Asian. You're such a banana. Yellow on the outside, white on the inside. You're Catholic? I thought you all worship Buddha. When did Asians get so good at dancing? Asians are taking over everything. You're Japanese? Do you eat sushi at home? Are ninjas real? Has anyone in your family ever killed themselves? You're not really American. Are your parents strict? What would your parents do to you if you don't bring home straight A's? Were your parents in the war? Which side? Are you mixed? Mixed Asians are hotter than full Asians. I would let you drive, but I want to get there alive. Why do you take care of your grandparents? Just put them in a home. You don't speak Chinese? Isn't it all the same? And that is how you parallel park. See how easy that is? You're from Korea? North or south? Are you a doctor? Are you a geisha? Are you an engineer? You have really big eyes for an Asian. No offense. Are you high, or is that just the way your eyes look? Would you ever get surgery on your eyes? Is that your real hair color? You have big boobs for an Asian girl. Do you eat fortune cookies at home? Do you love Hello Kitty? Do you drive one of those Tokyo Drift racing cars? Do you watch anime? Do you eat dogs? Do you have sideways vaginas? How big is your You know, for an Asian girl, you have a really nice ass. That's a compliment. Whoa. Ni hao mao. Watch this. Oh, 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 Gangnam Style. Subscribe already. And this way you can watch me do comedy.
So that is a video that was created by actor comedian Elliot Chang, and it's entitled "Things People Say to Asians," and you can see that it was riddled with lots of different stereotypes and myths that people often associate with Asian Americans. And I can personally say, and maybe some of you as well, that as outlandish as so many of them seem, most of them I have been asked at one point or another. So today what I want to do is there's so many stereotypes and myths that we could talk about and get into, but I want to focus on like 4 prominent stereotypes that people associate with ASPAs. And those are the model minority, the perpetual foreigner. Those 2 are sort of examples of racialized stereotypes. And then the hypersexualization of Asian women and the desexualization of Asian men, these being examples of gendered stereotypes. You can see that there are other stereotypes and tropes, some of which you shared and some that we saw in the video, that are associated with these 4 stereotypes. I'm going to focus on these 4 briefly because we have limited time. So the model minority myth. The model minority myth is the false belief that all Asians excel academically, particularly in math, as someone pointed out, and are overrepresented in higher education. It's the false belief that all Asian Americans are wealthy, or at least don't require or accept any form of public assistance. It's the false belief that Asian Americans do not experience racism, or if they do, they don't complain about it. They just seek upward mobility, put their heads down, work hard, and stay quiet. The model minority myth is a tool of white supremacy. The myth has been, it's been around for a long time, and it has a long history in the way that it's been used as what we call a wedge issue. So it pits one group of racialized people against another, particularly against Black people and African Americans. It lessens the potential for racialized groups to come together in solidarity against systemic racism. The myth is used as an argument against racial equity policies. So, in other words, Asian Americans are proof that marginalized racial groups can be successful. They're lauded as the minority that other minorities should try to emulate. So it's really important, I think, to note that this stereotype is not only harmful and wrong and inaccurate for Asian Americans, but it also is harmful for other racially minoritized groups. The model minority myth is false flattery. It's used to whitewash problems, and it's dangerous because it's a blanket stereotype that conceals the complexity of and issues experienced by the Asian American population. The myth obscures the history of racism encountered by Asian Americans and the need for resources in their communities. There's a long history of racism against Asian Americans in the U.S. that is not found in school curriculum and is missing from racial and cultural discourse. The trauma that results is not acknowledged or addressed. The myth renders Asian Americans invisible in discussions of race and prejudice in America. And the model minority myth increases stigma around mental health. Asian Americans are 3 times less likely to seek mental health services than white people. For some, the pressure of being part of a model minority stands in the way of treatment. Many Asian Americans see themselves as part of a group that is seamlessly integrated into this new society, into, being American. They characterize themselves as intelligent, industrious, and fully in charge of their lives. So for many, admitting to weakness is letting down an entire community. Okay, come on. All right. So the next one is the perpetual foreigner myth. And this myth portrays Asian Americans as fundamentally foreign. So no matter how many generations your families or your communities have been in the U.S., they're not considered American. It casts Asian Americans as inherently other. The myth has contributed to the ongoing xenophobia and anti-Asian racism and violence directed toward ASPAs, as in the case of anti-Chinese immigration exclusion laws, anti-Filipino race riots, Japanese internment during World War II, anti-Sikh violence after the tragedy of September 11th, and currently the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes due to COVID-19. This myth of the perpetual foreigner allows for the use of Asian Americans to be scapegoats in times of national crisis. So the stereotype of the hypersexualization of Asian American women and the desexualization of Asian American men is something that is found in all forms of media. Asian American women are either portrayed as the China doll, so the submissive lotus blossom, the geisha, or they're portrayed as the dragon lady, so the cold, ruthless assassin temptress. Asian American men are usually either portrayed as the nerd, someone who's highly intelligent, a tech genius, or they're portrayed as a kung fu master. Rarely, if ever, are Asian men cast as being in a relationship or the love interest. Because of our patriarchal society that we live in, when Asian men started emigrating into the US and threatening, quote unquote, threatening American men by stealing their jobs and their women, the response was to belittle Asian men, to emasculate them, to feminize them. These stereotypes of femininity are born of racism and sexism. Sexualized, submissive stereotypes of Asian women lead to higher rates of violence. Both stereotypes serve the purpose of dehumanization, and there are many instances that are evidence to the fact, from the murder of Vincent Chin in Detroit in the 1980s to the murders of 7 women who identify as Asian in Atlanta last year. The lack of visibility and improper representation in the media can damage one's self-esteem. This can make Asian Americans develop feelings of alienation and false perceptions of their role in society. I'd like to share another video with you.
This is Katana. She's got my back. She can cut all you in half with one sword stroke, just like mowing the lawn. Or you're more used to me alive. Don't make me change my mind.
You're wasting your time talking to her. However, you would not be wasting your time if you were dancing with her.
The most common stereotypes that Asian women encounter in Hollywood have been lotus blossoms, dragon ladies, prostitute. So I think that lens of Asian women as exotica, and Orientalism comes from the West, right? So there has been a history of conquest, and so the European idea of the East as exotic, as a country to plunder, to exploit. I think women were part of that exotica. This mythology of the Asian woman as available, the body available to the white man, that story is so familiar to Western society. Puccini's Madame Butterfly is important because in terms of an opera, it's seen as one of the classics, but also the story of the kind of geisha, the submissive woman that the white man conquers and sort of marries, but then rejects at the end, and then she kills herself. The Madame Butterfly trope is so important in US culture because I think it really marks the idea of the Asian woman exists for the white man's pleasure. Anna May Wong, she is the first Chinese-American star. She joked that on her tombstone that the epitaph should read, she died 1,000 deaths, right? Because that's all she did at the end of her films was die. She was limited by the imagination of Hollywood, which still put her in a lot of these kind of lotus blossom and prostitute roles, but she also inhabited these villainous roles. She played the daughter of Fu Manchu in Daughter of the Dragon.
My flower daughter.
My honored father.
And they would draw her eyes very much the cat eyes and blunt bangs. Nancy Kwan, this was in the 60s, one of the biggest international roles was The World of Susie Wong, and she starred as a prostitute.
Don't go away, stay with me.
Why you can't? Nothing to you.
You go to the 80s and Full Metal Jacket, and you have Asian women seen as prostitutes again.
Me so horny. Me love you long time.
I think every Asian woman I know has been propositioned or made fun or catcalled with those lines. And we know exactly what it is. Even if we haven't seen the movie, we know that it comes from, you know, US culture, this idea of Asian women as prostitutes.
She'd be like,
Oh, me so horny. Me love you long time.
Unfortunately, even when we move forward, like Rush Hour, there's a scene where they walk into a room and then these Oriental screens open.
You pick any girl for you and your friend.
it's like this vicious cycle, right? Of like, this is what Asian women are, and then you watch the images and you're like, okay, this is what Asian women are, and then you produce them again. And then of course that affects how you interact and conceptualize, and also in extreme cases, you know, mass murders. And so the power of the image to reinforce and to, you know, actually plant ideas in people's minds is immeasurable.
We live in a world where most people ingest media and we don't really think about it. Where is this coming from? Who's behind the camera? What is the lens in which we are looking through? Media is a symptom and not the illness. The real illness is white supremacy, capitalism, imperialism. Those are the things that make all of this possible. The nature of all stereotypes is that they dehumanize people and prevent us from seeing them in their whole humanity. How do we disrupt myths and stereotypes? Well, teach Asian American history in schools. This is not something that happens in schools across the country. Educate professional communities about the historic usage of myths and stereotypes. Collect and include meaningful data on the ASPA community. Disaggregate that data. So institutions are not disaggregating their data on different ASPA communities, often because of the model minority myth and because Asian Americans are treated as a monolith. This results in limited resources, support, and services to ASPAs who face challenges and need assistance. Be proactive in doing anti-bias and anti-racism work in our community to better support the ASPA community. Amplifying voices of Asian Americans, centering the stories of Asian Americans, increasing visibility and representation of ASPAs in the political, social, cultural, medical, psychological, academic, and community spheres. And increasing opportunities for and access to ASPA history, arts, performances, cultural events, cuisine, people, and communities. So, what is it that we are doing in Evanston? One of the things that has happened in the past year is the passing of the TEACH Act. And the TEACH Act mandates that Asian American history and the Asian American experience be taught in all K through 12 public schools in Illinois. In Illinois, if you're not familiar with the TEACH Act, Illinois is the first state to adopt the TEACH Act. And so this fall of, what year are we in? 2022. All schools are expected to integrate Asian American history and the Asian American experience into their curriculum. Here in Evanston, we have the Evanston ASPA Initiative, the Umbrella Arts Festival, which is a festival that started last year and grew this year. We just had it last weekend or the weekend before, and it is a celebration of art and music and performance, dance, food, traditions, culture, but really encompassing all of the different Asian, South Asian, Pacific Islander countries, cultures, ethnicities that fall under that umbrella of Asian American. The placemaking project is something that just started, and that is in partnership with the Evanston History Center. And it is a project that aims to establish a archive of Asian, South Asian, Pacific Islander people in Evanston. To date, there is no such archive or documentation that exists. The Evanston History Center doesn't have anything in their archives. The Evanston Public Library doesn't have anything in their archives. There isn't a centralized, accessible location for people to learn about and research Asian American history for local Asian, South Asians, and Pacific Islanders. So the placemaking project is actually it's, the goal is to fix that. One of the things that prompted this is that with the Teach Act happening and beginning in the fall, we kind of wonder, how is it that we can teach Asian American history and the Asian American experience without having some personal context for it, and not having any way to find out, like, when were the first Asians, who were the first Asians who moved to Evanston or started a business in Evanston. What are those stories, and what's the timeline for that? Without that, Asian students who identify as ASPA, they don't see themselves reflected in their own community. And students who don't identify as ASPA, they aren't able to connect with it at all, because they're not learning about the challenges and the contributions that Asian Americans have made locally in our community. The Kitchen Table Stories Project is an art-based initiative to increase the visibility and representation of the Asian, South Asian, Pacific Islander community here in Evanston. And there are a few things that are happening under that umbrella. This summer at the Evanston Art Center, I think it's opening on July 9th through August 20th, there is going to be an exhibit of artwork created by local Asian, South Asian, Pacific Islander artists, and that will be on display. And in addition to that, there will be a bunch of programming associated. There will be artist talks that artists who are participating in the exhibit will present. There will be storytelling events. There will be a traditional Chinese tea ceremony. There will be a Ghibli festival, which will celebrate all things Ghibli and Japanese anime, and it will be for all ages. And there will be professional development workshops that are going to hopefully be a good resource for educators in Evanston to start thinking about how they're going to incorporate Asian American history and the Asian American experience into their curriculum. As many of you know, District 65 especially has a lot going on. And schools in general, school districts in general, are still reeling and trying to catch up and move forward after the disruption that happened as a result of the pandemic the last couple of years. And although the Teach Act is a really wonderful thing, and the idea of bringing the Asian American experience and history into the classrooms, there is not a lot that's in place for that. And it's really feeling very, I think, heavy and cumbersome for educators who are,
I have to disagree.
a lot of it feels from what I've heard from teachers who are trying to prepare for it, there's it feels like a lot. It feels like another thing. And so we're hoping to, we're going to be working with the district and with also Asian Americans Advancing Justice to try to create these art-based uh, workshops and professional developments, and also workshops that can be brought into the classroom for students in order to try to support and offer resources as much as possible for educators to make this successful in the schools.
Um, Melissa, I think someone had a comment.
Uh-huh.
Linda, did you have a comment?
Yes, I do. I've worked with the Evanston Skokie School District for the past 10 years, and I will let you know that the new superintendent is very, very much a proponent of inclusive history initiatives. And in fact, I sit on that committee, and as a result, I am making sure this summer I will be part of the review team looking at the K-5 and 6-8 middle school social studies and history curriculum to see that the Teach Act, that it aligns with the Teach Act. And I've attended those AAHA teacher workshops last week. The online versions, and they were excellent.
Yes.
And just from my lived experience and the Asian activism that I've done for basically since the 80s, I'm quite knowledgeable about history of the local Asian communities, plural, because as you say, we're not a monolithic community, but rather very diverse. And so essentially, I like to focus more on positive. And going forward, we move forward in a positive light. We are doing everything we can at the Evanston Skokie School District with, I would say, with what we have, and I'm just they were very gracious and let me conduct a professional development workshop for certified staff, teaching staff in December. We had 80 people attend, and it was very similar to your presentation. I focused a lot on it was titled Countering Asian American Stereotypes, the Myth of the Modern Minority, and did the overview of AAPI history. Essentially what it did was it's laying the groundwork and opening teachers, a lot of teachers, it's not through intent, but more through lack of exposure, lack of opportunities to be exposed to AAPI history. And so I'm helping to make sure that happens in our district. So
it's so amazing to hear that. Thank you so much, Linda. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing. I completely agree with you. I think that the superintendent is really behind this and is finding ways, and that was one of the reasons that we had the conversation with the curriculum.
Was it Stacy?
Stacy, yes.
Or was
yes.
it?
So it's, I mean, I'm so excited about the fact that they're so excited about it, and want to do everything that they can. I guess I was speaking more to the fact that there is, the teachers that I work with and the teachers that I know are so tired.
Oh, well, yeah, definitely. That's
And the bandwidth
fatigue.
and the
pandemic fatigue.
Yes.
And
the bandwidth, like it just, I mean, and the trauma of the past couple of years is really taking a toll. And so with anything, and I don't mean even like specifically the Teach Act, I think with everything, the idea of trying to do something new or add something is so daunting.
Mhm.
And
And I think,
so,
yeah, and it's also, you have to, besides the staff, the teaching staff and administrators, meaning the principals, it's also the students. That this has been, a return to quasi normalcy in the classroom.
right.
And so they have to have time to adapt to that.
Mhm.
And you spoke about art, and I think that's great. I mean, art is all part of the SEL, social emotional learning,
Mhm.
that component that students, all people need
Mhm.
uh, to supplement academic learning.
Mhm.
And we just, the Foundation 65 had graciously, I submitted a grant proposal for a ancestral crafting class, an ancestral cultural crafting class, which just wound up, and it tied in beautifully with AAPI Heritage Month.
Mhm.
Because, being Japanese, I talked about origami, the history of origami, the traditions, how washi paper is made, how that can, that actually was one of the uh, guiding economic drivers to some of the small villages in Japan that exclusively produced
Mhm.
washi paper.
Mhm.
So there's, and the kids had no idea. It was just one, or the the legend of the thousand cranes. I mean, people always wonder why do they always make cranes, when they do the paper folding. So there are different approaches to um, becoming aware of Asian history. I don't think the hammer on the head approach really works with students. I think
Um,
there's so many different ways. So that's it. I'm sorry to impose on your time.
No, it's okay, and I appreciate you sharing, and I think that really is like I totally agree with you with, what are all the different ways that we can approach this? And for me, you know, my my belief in the power of art
Mhm.
um is really is I have found both in my personal experience and also in working with young people, especially,
Mhm.
um, that if we're able to find a way to utilize and tap into the power of art, that opens up a whole nother way of learning and bringing in the opportunities for social emotional learning and sociocultural awareness.
Mhm.
And so a lot of these things that I'm talking about are specifically, really just based in how do we use the arts
Mhm.
and how do we tap into the fact that our young people are so attached to media,
Mhm.
and so what can we do from what can we do to address the visual, right? The visual is the image. It's so powerful. And the visual that historically people have seen are these stereotypical images of Asian Americans throughout history. And so, it's I think that with the Teach Act, I think that with the work, Linda, that you are doing and the district is doing, I think that the increase in more stories
Mhm.
in films and in books and in on TV and art and music, I think that this is a really sort of exciting time to be tapping into that. And
Crazy Rich Asians. That was, and then Minari. Um,
mhm, mhm,
Films have such impact, and they're the cultural touchstones
mhm.
for for a lot of students, because they are media saturated.
Yes, yes. And so the more, the and 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 I and I talk about film as an art form, and I talk about, television and the stories that are written as art forms. I mean, these are ways, the ways that we can find to tap into these stories and share these stories. That's really, that's sort of the job, right? That's the goal, when trying to disrupt these stereotypes. Did anyone have any other questions before we move on? So I am going to bring you back to my volcano. And this one unpacks my story a bit more, um, in that it tells you what I am not. I am not good at math. I am not submissive. I am not quiet. Um, I am not willing to keep my head down. I'm not an expert of anything but my own story. And then, if you're going to dig a little bit deeper, and this metaphor of like the lava and the magma, and you know the 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 the, the spaces inside us, inside me, that are bubbling up, I think, in this time, especially with everything that's going on, in our, culture, as social, socially, politically. Um, that's where my frustrations and my fears and my exhaustion and my sadness and my anger lie. But it's what pushes me to do the work that I do, and the work that I try to partner with and engage in with others who are doing this work. Um, I am going to end with a clip from Chimamanda Adichie. Um, she talks about the danger of the single story, and I'm sure many of you have seen her talk. So this is just a few minutes of it. It's not the whole thing. And I think it doesn't hurt to be reminded of her message, because I think it speaks to how vital it is that we are exposed to many different stories of many different people, disrupt those stereotypes that cause harm and violence to our communities. And one of the ways in which we do that is through these different medias of art. So I'm going to share this.
I come from a conventional middle-class Nigerian family. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator. And so we had, as was the norm, living domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and our old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the...
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
Felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this: she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me as an African was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals. So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. It is impossible to talk about the single story without talking about power. There is a word, an Igbo word, that I think about whenever I think about the power structures of the world, and it is nkali. It's a noun that loosely translates to be greater than another. Like our economic and political worlds, stories too are defined by the principle of nkali. How they are told, who tells them, when they are told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. The Palestinian poet Mourid Barghouti writes that if you want to dispossess a people, the simplest way to do it is to tell their story and to start with secondly. Start the story with the arrows of the Native Americans and not with the arrival of the British, and you have an entirely different story. Start the story with the failure of the African state and not with the colonial creation of the African state, and you have an entirely different story.
So I am going to end there and ask if there are any questions.
Can you show that last? It went so fast. You had a slide up after.
Oh, I can, yes. These are the words I think that are like the guiding principles of this work: representation, visibility, voice, placemaking, art, story, and change.
Yeah, this is Jessica. I have a question. I'm always looking for recommendations, especially of memoirs. I think of Big Little Man, of Minor Feelings. And I was wondering, oh, and also The Best We Could Do. And I'm just wondering, maybe it's hard to like recommend one and not like 20, but like, what are some of your favorite memoirs or realistic fiction stories that center Asian or Asian American folks?
Mhm. Oh my gosh, I have so many. I actually put together a resource list that,
Yay!
yes, that has some of the, it's got the links to the videos that I showed, and also some more resources on stereotypes, and then also book lists and film lists and what else? Something else. And I can't remember what it is. But yes, and I'm going to share that with all of you. Any other questions, thoughts?
Hi, I'm Chin. I'm the first year student in art therapy program in SAIC. So yeah, hi. My advisor recommended me to listen to this presentation for the event tonight. I'm so glad I come to the present. I mean, come to the event. I join you guys. So actually, I feel empathy from this presentation because as a Chinese, mainland Chinese in studying in the U.S., actually I feel a lot of I do feel some stereotypes from the local people, from somebody's. But I really don't want to talk about this. Well, like there is I don't know when I heard about stereotype in the U.S. Actually, at the beginning, when I studied here, at the beginning, I didn't feel too much like people will have stereotype on me, on my identity. But after I especially start from the pandemic, the COVID-19, I feel exactly even the physical or mentally stereotype from the local Americans. Like they feel we carried a virus or we carried the COVID-19, like because the COVID-19 started from mainland China. But I do feel some uncomfortable because people have stereotype on me. So, but I do have, I understand like why people, they react weird or they have some attacks behavior. But there is a one point I feel from our presentation today is like because I don't know how to pronounce your name, Melissa.
My
right?
name, Melissa.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Melissa. I don't want to. Yeah, like you were talking about the Asian or Asian Americans based on the U.S., based on the American environment. Like there is another thing I want to share is like I'm like a Chinese or an Asian Chinese, like I do feel another stereotype from American Asian or Asian Americans as well. And also I can feel the obviously feeling from those Asians more than white people. Probably is we have a very like similar sensitivity between the same identity or from same cultural background. And there are some Asian Americans or especially American Chinese, they will very have their openness or their stereotypes between mainland Chinese. And also there have some people from Taiwan, Taiwanese, and Hong Kongers. They don't call them Chinese as well. Like they before, because they are very specific regions and different countries. And based on my mainland Chinese identity, I do feel like more a strong stereotype from the same race peoples. Like I don't know, they talk about this. I never heard people talk about this in my classes or in this program, but I can feel this absolutely have those problems or issues between others. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think one of the things that I can speak to from my personal experience is I absolutely, especially growing up, I absolutely experienced some othering by people who identified as full Filipino or full Indian, or also people who who are immigrants and not considering me Filipino or Indian because I'm so Americanized. And yet then I also have the othering of Americans, specifically white Americans. I don't really belong there either. So it's this interesting in between space of getting it from from lots of different directions. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you so much. Hi, Viola.
Hi. I do want to say, unfortunately, with human nature, we do stereotype people because we only see the surface of who people are. And I think the best way of moving forward is really to get to know the cultures of people, to get to know people. That's the only way that we can get past all these stereotypes, because otherwise we would never know, and we'll continue to think that we're all Chinese or we're all good at math when we're not, because I'm not good at math either.
Yeah, and I think that I agree. Thank you so much, Viola. I think it's really rooted in those relationships, right? It's really about, but it's really about the opportunity to get to know people. And I think that, you know, I mean, I'm biased, but I think that the arts offer so many different opportunities to actually engage and participate. And that's where all of the different stories can come out. So it's not just that single story, that stereotype. So yeah, thank you. I also want to, I'm going to give a shout out for Viola because she is going to be participating in the exhibit that is happening this summer. So if you're able to come to the Evanston Art Center, she will have some artwork there as well.
Is it, is it too late to join? When was the deadline for that? For that?
The deadline was
I'm sure it was
in February, but
Oh.
but Linda, definitely reach out to me so we can talk.
Okay.
Melissa, if you could send me the slides, and then I could send the slides to all of those that registered, including the video.
Okay.
So in case you all didn't know, we are recording, and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel at the Evanston Public Library YouTube channel.
Oh, let me write that down.
So I'll just, I know everyone who registered, so I can just send everything to them, to you all.
Great.
Is it okay for me to ask, did you present recently at the Skokie Library? Or was
I
that
did
somebody
not.
else?
I did not.
Oh, there's another person who did a similar thing, I think, and it also dealt with stories. Okay. I think hers was more from a legal aspect, though. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Yours was excellent. Just
Thank
brilliant.
you. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions for Melissa before we wrap up?
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for being here.
Can
Thank
you
you
put
all.
your email in the chat? If people
Yes.
want to reach you, thank you.
I will do that. Oh, thank you, Viola. I'm sorry. Real quick before we end, Kids Create Change is hosting a lantern floating ceremony on May 31st at the Arrington Lagoon at 7 p.m. And the intention behind this ceremony is to give everyone in the community who wants to an opportunity to come together to honor some of the like losses and also the celebrations that were not fully realized during the pandemic when we were all having to deal with these things in isolation. So it's an opportunity for people to come together. The oh gosh, I'm gonna put in here the website for Kids Create Change. There's information about it, and you can register for it or just find out some more information about it. But I would love it if you would all join us.
Will that be part of your slides as well? I can just include everything in the email I sent to everyone.
I will, yes, I will. I'll include that as well.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Melissa, excellent presentation. I really enjoyed the Q&A as well. I really learned a lot, and especially on stereotypes. So that's something I can relate with as well, being an African American. So thank you all. for registering for the presentation. And thank you again, Melissa.
Thank you so much. Everyone have a good evening.
Bye, thank
Okay,
you.
take care, everyone. Bye-bye.